Still
On the Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And on today's episode, Mario Bautista, you a G. Holy cow, that was some beating. PFL's #1 pound for pound also got down. We'll talk about that performance. And the UFC execs spent a few days in court this past week. Let's go over the deets. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con, and look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He is here in Las Vegas. Danny Segura checking in from the 305 down in Miami. And Nolan King, the Boston shot caller, he is in Boston. Not feeling too well, so let's lay off the guy. He did show up to work, though. All right. Cold Coffee's on the ones and twos. He's our fabulous producer. Let's get going. Please hit that like button here if you're watching on YouTube. Let's get that algorithm going. Guys, am I jumping the gun here or what? Does Peter Yan now have a possible fourth dance partner out there? O'Malley, Marab, Umar, and Mario Bautista? Nolan, that was a mauling, no? Did he make that kind of statement?
Mario Bautista is officially, if he wasn't already in the minds of the masses, an elite bantamweight contender, right? And I think the thing that he could hang his hat on most coming into this fight was the fact that he had, been competitive against the top guys in the division. But now he's got a win that was just a total domination, marquee sort of victory, one that he can really point to on his highlight reel and say, look, I went out there, I headlined a fight, and I totally dominated a really tough opponent. So he just totally took Lock Dog to school. I think that second round in particular, it was just one thing after the next, transition after transition, and he goes out there and he gets the choke. So good for him, a guy that maybe we didn't really project to be to this level. So it's been fun seeing him since his UFC debut, how much better he's gotten. And even when it seemed like maybe he would be a guy that hangs out in the middle of the division, that he was able to take things even a step further, to turn his career even at a higher trajectory up the divisional ladder. So really good win for him. Seems like a great guy. I'm happy for him, and I'm sure that the matchmakers are too, to have him to play around with at bantamweight.
Danny, let's get a reaction from you. I mean, it wasn't not long ago that he was fighting Jose Aldo, got the win, but did not impress. Kind of went into a little doghouse of his own, not Sarukian-like, right? But then he also sent Patchy Mix packing, loses to Umar Nurmagomedov, but actually competed very well. And then this performance here, where does he stand? And let me get your reaction to the win over Oliveira.
I first want to react to you guys' reaction. I think you guys are a bit over the top here with this win for Bautista. Look, I'm not hating. A win is a win. He did look good, but we also got to talk about how poor Oliveira looked here. And he went in severely compromised. He was severely overweight, had a crazy weight cut. He apparently was injured and had broken his arm just a month prior. This dude did not fight, not even at 80%. I mean, you just got to look at his fight compared to his previous fights, and the way the way he quickly tapped. I mean, he kind of just folded. And again, Bautista can't control that. All he can do is go in there and look as good as possible, and that's exactly what he did. But I'm not ready to say this guy's in line for a title shot. I'm not ready to say that this guy is one of the biggest threats at 135 pounds for the champion. I think I want to see a lot more, and this time fighting a guy that's not low in the rankings and not highly compromised, until he can beat one of those contenders at the top, like a Corey Sandhagen, like a Sean O'Malley, like an Umar Nurmagomedov, and these guys that are right outside of a championship fight. I'm not ready to declare him a threat to the title just yet. Is he a top 10 fighter? Yes, but that's where I lay my expectations.
He's not top 5.
No, I don't think you can watch that performance and say that it proved to you that he's top 5. He could be, right? But like, do we have an absolute answer? No. That was a terrible performance from Oliveira, and he just folded. He folded in that fight. I mean, literally the worst possible way to win the fight would be to clinch with Bautista, and that's exactly what he did in round 1. Then he got taken down, and he taps 2 seconds after the choke is synced in. And even just laying down and sitting on the floor right after round 1, like the guy was defeated going in there. I don't know if he just went in there for a paycheck, if it was too much of an opportunity being a main event to pass up or what, but he was in no conditions to be fighting.
Yeah, Bautista then revealing all these injuries afterwards. It's like, bro, what are you doing in there? You know, and it's a double-edged sword, because if you pull out, maybe you upset the bosses, but look at how he hurt himself, and now Danny's taking a little shine off Bautista's victory because Oliveira looked that bad. All right, Goes, you agree with Danny, or is he tripping?
I mean, yeah, there's some merit to that, if all that stuff is true. But at the end of the day, all we have to judge him on is what actually happened in the cage, right? He walked in, and that was a fight. But yeah, Bautista looked great. I think one thing that stands out for me is after his last loss, I don't feel like we felt like it was a guy who got like fraud checked or anything like that. I think he just ran into a better fighter. And those feelings definitely carried into this fight with this performance that he had. I think he proved that he is top level. You know, he just ran into a freight train, but he's done things just in one fight that's kind of made us say this road back is going to be a lot quicker if he wants it to be. I'm one of the guys that feels like maybe he should take his time in doing this. But this was not a small improvement. This is like a big improvement from fight to fight. And we've kind of seen this throughout his career. You know, he's not an undefeated fighter. He suffered losses, but he always seems to figure it out and turn it around. And one thing that I really liked about this performance in general is he kind of had a little bit of swag going into the fight. After the fight, I felt like he said the right things. He got the performance bonus. I just feel like it's one of those performances that if you didn't know who he was, now you really do, and you get excited when you see him on a card.
No doubt about that. All right, let me put you guys on the spot here. He's calling out Sandhagen. And if you guys know of another name that would make sense at this point, you know, feel free to do it, because we'll go back around the circle. But real quick, because I'm a little, I don't know, Danny kind of poo-pooed all the hype I gave this guy. Who do you got, man? Bautista or Sandhagen right now? If they make that fight. Remember, they fought once before. Sandhagen hung a nail on him. It was a while back. And Sandhagen is considered probably top 5. So who would you favor early on, Danny, in that fight?
Sandhagen.
Want to bet?
Sure.
All right.
What do you want to bet?
Put your hand up. There you go. We'll think about it. But no,
me and Goes are staying out of this. No draw. Side bet here.
I'm not putting my mustache on the line. I just grew this baby back, bro. It took a lot.
It's gonna be 5 rounds. Nolan and Goes. You bet the draw.
Nope.
Right? Who do you like, Nolan? If they make this fight 5 rounds, it has to be probably.
I'd have to go with Sandhagen. I still think he remains like one of the trickiest matchups in the division for anybody. Especially, you know, talking behind the scenes to the different managers and coaches throughout the years. It always seems like when his name comes up, everybody's like, like we'd prefer to take a different way to the top, right? So I think he's just a very difficult matchup regardless of who he faces. And I think for Bautista in particular, I would like Sandhagen in that fight. I think it would be close at times, but I feel fairly confident in my pick too.
Goes?
Nolan.
Oh,
I'm gonna go Bautista. But I think it would be a really, really close fight, and I don't think either guy could run away with it. I like the fact that he has the confidence in wanting to avenge this loss, and but I don't think that's like the easiest fight either. That's very tough. Corey Sandhagen gives people a lot of problems, but I would lean Bautista right now.
By the way, before you guys start another bet, Goes has one pending. We bet that if Tyson Teixeira won, he would do a shoey.
No, we did not bet that.
Yeah, we did.
I was very clear about that one.
Yeah, we did.
Nah.
Yeah, you owe us a shoey, man.
I wouldn't even do it out of my shoe, let alone someone else's. Ugh.
Although Goes is growing the beard out. Maybe he's got other bets that he's won or lost that he's not telling us about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have this before the Super Bowl, but the Super Bowl was so long and boring. It just grew out.
All right, guys. Well, listen, I thought it was an amazing performance. And look, to be fair, Corey Sandhagen, when he lost to Marab, he even actually looked a lot better. I think you can look better in we call it like a quality loss, a good showing of yourself, and then let's see how you bounce back. Both guys obviously are in a division that's very wrestling top heavy, so I think they needed to address that. But I just like how Bautista came in very, very lean, and then he just went after him so seamless, man. It was amazing. Yeah, granted, Oliveira revealed to us what I think a partially broken forearm, a partially rotator cuff, and some other injury, and I was like, well, it did look that bad, but yeah, I mean, we can only judge them on what we see here. First Meta Apex event, guys, with the crowd. How did it feel? Your reaction to that, Nolan?
I think it was much better, and particularly if they're not even all the way of where they're going to be in a few months. It sounds like they still have to add a few more 100 seats in there. I think it was a good step in the right direction, right? I mean, a little bit that even just having a few hundred more people, you can feel the energy, right? It doesn't have that empty warehouse sort of feel. It has more of like a intimate sort of, I saw somebody mention like almost like with pro wrestling, like the ECW sort of thing, where you feel like, all right, not a lot of people in here, but everybody's kind of on top of the action and they're really into it. So I think it kind of has, the more people you add in there that you're able to comfortably put, it will have a reverse effect. You almost feel like it's something maybe bigger than it is. So I hope that I hope to see those few more 100 seats added, and I really don't have complaints about that.
Have you been in the Apex at all, Nolan?
I've been in there. I have not covered a fight in there, but I've been in there for media days and stuff. Like, I can see in the cage area and everything. All
right, Goes, you've been in it before they revamped it. You've been in it for boxing. You haven't been in it for MMA, but what were your thoughts seeing it on television?
I think it had a better feel. It's probably a good middle ground because you just can't compare it to when they go on the road, especially some of these places that maybe don't get the pay-per-views. The fans really do come out and support. Some of these moments, some of these things that these fighters do really do deserve to have the roar of the crowd behind it. You're probably never going to get that entirely at the Apex, but this is a step above what they had been doing. And I think you have to appreciate that as a fan, as a fighter. And like Nolan said, when they even add more seats, I think it'll even be more of a different feel. So I like that it's a change.
Mm-hmm. Danny, back to you with your reaction to how you saw it with your eyes, and then back to Bautista and Sandhagen. I'm jumping the gun here. If not him, is there someone else, or do you like that actual possible fight booking in the future?
For who?
Bautista. We penciled him in like he's really fighting Sandhagen. It was just part of his call-up. But is there another name maybe that would make more sense for him? And then how did you like seeing the Meta Apex, with the way they've revamped it?
I thought it was a lot better as far as like consuming the product. You hearing the crowd, like a shot lands and you hear the crowd get excited. It just makes the fight like a real fight, right? Like if somebody's fighting, people get excited. It is a weird and a very unnatural thing to see two guys fighting, very like pandemic-esque, right? Like two guys fighting and there's barely any noise. Like that just never sits right? This is a show. This is the most exciting sport in the world, so there should be fans. So I'm glad that that got fixed. That was an easy fix, in my opinion, that they could have done a long time ago, and it clearly showed. The card, it felt more exciting, in my opinion, than your usual Apex card. And I do gotta say, I think it was Javid Basharat or Farid. I'm not quite sure, but they did an interview, obviously after the fact, speaking about their win. I think it was Farid Basharat, and he was saying how like whenever he fought at the Apex, it had like a weird, eerie feeling, and it was uncomfortable. And now when he was in there, he actually got pumped up, and the crowd was hyping him up, and his efforts were even bigger and greater because of the crowd, because of the public. So I think both from a public perspective and a fighter perspective, this was a huge win getting the crowd in there. Mm-hmm. And as far as what could be next for Mario, I do like the Sanhagen fight. I think he should fight anybody ranked above him. So Sanhagen makes sense. I think Ayman Sahabi makes sense as well. Yeah, I think probably those two are the ones that jump out.
I think Bautista beats the hobby, honestly.
I think so too.
Yeah, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm riding his jock either. He looked great. I'm a fan of his. Nolan, Oliveira, man, what do we do with this guy? It's almost like he laid out reasoning for why he sucked. Okay, so do we still give him a top name, or how much did his stock drop?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to tell. I mean, the injury thing could be legit, but I think people have to understand this is like the lock dog experience. You have to take the good with the bad. The guy has always, in every aspect of his career, his in cage and out of cage, the way he carries himself has been risky. He's taken risks. I mean, if we go back and look at some of his other fights more recently, the Said Nurmagomedov fight, I remember people being like, yo, these guys are so sloppy and they're exhausted. The Kyler Phillips fight, I remember seeing criticism about him walking with his hands down, but it's the way that he's done it his whole career. He's been somebody that risks something to try to gain something else. I think that's why the UFC likes him. So for me to lean too much into it and say, oh, you know, Mario really schooled him. He beat him technically on the ground. He just sliced through the attack and got the submission. That's very true. But I also have a tough time figuring out, A, how much of that is deficiencies in his skills, B, how much is that him being just this risky guy, or C, how much was he compromised? And he's a guy that cuts a tremendous amount of weight to get down there as well. He's a total workout addict from what I hear, just a freak of nature in the gym. I think he's certainly got the strength to fight at 145 pounds. And especially if he's killing himself, I would like to see him move up and fight up there. That would be my preference. But knowing him, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him back down at 135 again.
I wonder why he talks so much smack too on fight week. He's gonna get rid of this guy. He's boring, and then he does that. I was like, wow. All right, we got to move on from the fight. Goes Kyoji Horiguchi, obviously back. It wasn't his debut when he won his last fight. It was him coming back after 8 or 9 years, re-debuting, if that's a term, winning, and now he had Amir Albazi in front of him. He won again. I mean, that's all this guy kind of seems to do is win. I think he's like 35-5. He's captured world titles at flyweight, bantamweight. Not a UFC title though. But tell me your thoughts on this latest win for the Gooch.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, Albazi's not an easy out, you know. This was an interesting fight for me. I thought Horiguchi, everything was clicking. His speed, his angles, the takedowns, it all just blended so well. It's like he never left. And you have to scratch your head and go, why did they even let this guy go the first time? I mean, who knows what he could have done in a run here in the UFC. And at the end, he even spoke a little English. I appreciated that. I didn't understand a lot of it, but I appreciate that he starting to gravitate a little bit to the fans, but the performance itself was top notch. And you have to look forward and go, man, this guy, he can give some people some problems. We'll just see. That it's so congested at the top right now. That's got to play out a little bit, but great performance from him.
Nolan, what do you think of Kyoji Horiguchi's return, and where does he stand at 125 pounds?
Yeah, it was tremendous. I mean, flyweight's really fun right now all of a sudden, right? And I think, obviously with Pantoja being on the sidelines and being ready to come back, and Joshua Van having the title, and you got Tyra, you got Kopp, you've got Horiguchi. This is some good stuff. To me, I think it could be fairly easy, right, as to what you do next, which is take the UFC to Japan and have two pretty badass flyweight fights on the top of the card, right? You got Joshua Van, whether he's fighting Cap, whether he's fighting Tyra, and then have Horiguchi in the co-main against whichever one isn't chosen for the main event. So that's what I think. I think it's kind of a 4-man race right now. You also do have Pantoja. I don't really know if I don't know. Do you give him the next shot because he got hurt? Maybe. But I think regardless, that flyweight's fun, and that particularly in the Asian region, they have some really good stuff going.
Good stuff. All right. And Danny, your reaction to the Gooch's win, and also what would you do with them next? Because again, it's either going to be Van or Pantoja. Sorry, Kopp or Pantoja versus Van, and then Tatsuro Taira is kind of hanging out. By the way, those two guys don't seem to be, I don't think they despise each other, but they also don't seem to be pals. I'm talking about Taira and Horiguchi. The UFC has stated they want to come back to Japan. So how would you unpack all that?
It's incredible how good Horiguchi's looking, considering that 10 years ago he was in the UFC fighting for a belt. And then you fast forward 10 years, especially at flyweight too. And he's in title contention and could very well fight for the belt again. It is insane. I mean, incredible, incredible. This guy is truly an all-time great at 125 pounds. And in terms of where he kind of fits in this whole flyweight puzzle, man, that division is amazing right now. It's probably the best it's been, I would say, since that rivalry between Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno. It's at a crazy point in time right now with so many deserving contenders. I do think out of all the deserving contenders, he is in sort of in the back of the line. I do think Cap, Itaira, even Pantoja deserves a shot over him. But we'll see how this all shakes out. We know that calendar, we know that popularity, politics, contracts, a lot of things dictate a title shot. So I wouldn't rule out him being in one for his next fight, even though I think it's unlikely. So I think most likely the scenario for him would be a title eliminator bout. So say you throw in Cap and Van, right? Have Horiguchi fight either Pantoja or even Tatsuro Taira, and then maybe get a number one contender fight there. But certainly a title contender and a huge threat to the title at 125 pounds. He's looking good.
Amir Albazi, guys, anyone have a suggestion for him and how he can bounce back? He started off 17-1. He had a good run in the UFC. I think what's killed him is obviously the 2 losses, but big times lapse in between these fights where he just hasn't been active. Anybody have any ideas on who to pin him against next in his next fight?
It's got to be somebody like an Alex Perez or something. I do agree that I think he needs to get right back in there. There's too many times that he's sat out waiting. Yeah, and this division is moving quick. If you're not hanging around, they're gonna pass you up. So I think, yeah, get right back in there, but it's got to be someone a little bit. I would maybe go that route.
Okay. Ulan Beckhoff and Royval are also coming off losses. So if they want to do the coming off a loss versus coming off a loss, I also like the Perez idea. Perez was up at the top and then fell. Now just had a big win over Charles Johnson. It could be meaningful for him as well. All right. Flyweight is exciting. I like it. I like what they're doing there. Kuniev versus Rizvan Kuniev against Jailton Almeida. Almeida, to be fair, took the fight on not the latest notice ever. It wasn't Dan Ige-esque, but still, it wasn't a full camp. Your reaction to that one, Nolan? The big guys.
Yeah, I mean, heavyweight's in a tough spot, man, at this point in time, right? Like sometimes we've seen it ebb and flow throughout history. It used to be one of the most exciting divisions when, you know, you had the Brock Lesnar's and the Cain Velasquez's and every fight was really gripping. And now it seems like the deficiencies are creeping up the divisional ladder where we're getting fights with ranked fighters. Then you just watch and you're like, man, this is kind of tough. So, I mean, again, good for him. That's a big win. I think for Almeida, it's definitely a bigger loss than it is a big win for Kuniev. His momentum has been set back so far at this point. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised that he has not moved back down to 205 pounds. I know some people around him have been on him about potentially doing that. So I think you have to do it now, particularly if the UFC is being extra cutthroat about the excitement factor. I think this is your time to go down to light heavyweight, where you've competed before. We've seen you succeed, and see if you can have a little bit more success. See if you can do more with your takedowns, and you can get some finishes on the ground. Be a ground and pound guy. You don't have to be some guy that stands and you know, slugs on the feet, but you got to do something. And I just think he's got no momentum. He's stuck in park right now, and he needs to go back down to 205.
Danny, just how real is Kuniev? Like these 2 fights he's taken have been tough assignments, man. He beat Almeida and he lost to Blades, and that was a split decision, by the way. So we're talking about like 2 top 10 guys. Blades is 6, Almeida 7. Do we have a feel for just how good Kuniev is?
I mean, I don't want to be here and sound all negative because I know I shit all over the main event as well. A little bit of Mario Bautista, but again, Jailton Almeida looked really bad. So I don't know how much I want to praise your Kuniev. I do have to say, in terms of his schedule for his first 2 fights in the UFC, that's probably as tough as it gets. Like 2 top 10 guys, one a former title challenger. Yeah, that's a tough schedule, and he went 1-1, and arguably he could have gone 2-0. So certainly that's good. He is a skilled guy. I do consider him among the best 10 heavyweights right now in the world. But again, is that saying much given the state of the heavyweight division? I don't think so. What I would like to see from Kuniev, he's good, clearly, but we know that just doesn't cut it. That just doesn't do it, right? He needs to be exciting. And I know Jalton is a difficult dance partner to be exciting with, but I think he could have done a little bit more. He clinched a lot. And again, I think if he adds a little bit of excitement, I think he could be an interesting player. But until then, I kind of want to be a little bit reserved on Cunha's potential in the promotion.
Well, they
What
say
is
we
a
need
skilled
more
fighter,
big.
though?
What's that, guys?
What is a skilled fighter in this division? You have the couple guys at the top, and then there's just like a whole other division of guys that are just kind of lacking a lot of stuff. And there's so much up for grabs, right? Like all you have to do is be somewhat decent. And these guys just week after week keep dropping the ball. They lack aggression. I don't know what's going on, but that division has no direction.
Yeah, heavyweight division has gone to shit. It is the worst division in the UFC right now.
Take a look at women's bantamweight. That one's pretty bad too.
That one's pretty bad, but at least we have a super fight looming.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We can't really say the same thing at a heavyweight.
Well, they wanted big bodies. I think Cuniev's a big body. He'll work out. He's good. He won the first 2 rounds. He had a scare in the 3rd round. But then towards the end, he got the bravado back, and they were pointing down. You know, they threw a few exchanges. It looked like Cunha wanted more of it than Almeida. And I was wondering, is that smart? Because he had banked the first 2 rounds, and if Almeida happened to catch him, which I think he startled him with a shot prior to that, you know, they was playing with fire a little bit. But I kind of enjoyed it. We'll see what's next for him. The top is so. How do you describe what's happening at the top? I mean, Waldo wants either gone or Volkov for a interim. We don't know anything what's happening with Aspinall. Jones has bad hips, so whether he really is returning or not, because if he does, he's going to suck up one of those names, probably Aspinall. I don't know, man. Pavlovich, yeah, but Cunha basically has been shown, you know, not the easy road, but basically the quick road to these big names. So he's already in the mix. There's no stepping down from that. Guys, give me another highlight from this event, UFC Fight Night 266 in Las Vegas. Nolan, back to you.
Yeah, I liked Jakub Vikwac. I thought he looked really good. Getting that last second sub against Skafarov. You know, I think people don't give him Jakub enough credit for his resume outside the UFC. He was really good in KSW. Obviously one of their kind of poster boys over there. Coming here, had that fight against Patchy Mix, and now he goes out there and gets the submission. I thought the way he did it was fun. And he's somebody that we'll watch at 135 going forward. I'm not sure what his like potential will be, if he'll ever be like you know, kind of top contender, but I think he's the guy that we'll see in the rankings pretty soon.
How do you pronounce his name again?
I think it's Jakub Vikwac or Vikwac.
Wow.
Vikwac.
Okay, so I've been butchering the hell out of that one. He was clutch though, wasn't he? It was the last second, right? Of the last round?
Yeah, last second. So that was a buzzer beater. Yeah,
crazy.
not bad.
100K. They actually made him 75K because he was going to get 25 either way, but that's how clutch it was. Goes another highlight from you?
Dustin Jacoby got it done against Julius Walker, and it's 3 in a row. It's quiet, but it's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that guy was in Australia with Cody Brundage.
Mm-hmm.
Flew across the world on fight week, you know, so that's going there and coming back. You know, you kind of get a little swollen up there. And then to have to do all this, that was an incredible feat. How about you, Danny? Another highlight, please.
Farid Basharat, I think he's a dark horse at 135 pounds. I think he's one of the best fighters there. I think he's easily a top 10 fighter. He just hasn't had the name value opponent to prove it. And hopefully he does get that in his next fight. He called out Davison Figueiredo. I think that makes sense. But really anybody in the rankings, I'd like to see him against. The guy can do it all. Very, very skilled fighter. Very fun to watch as well.
Guys, Usman Nurmagomedov over at PFL Dubai, even the score on behalf of Eagle MMA. So Alfie Davis's opponent had beaten Gadzhi Rabadanov last year in the World Tournament. Usman, even that score, a very impressive stoppage over the Englishman, goes. Now, this Nurmagomedov is being mentioned in the same breath as Ilia Topuria by his cousin Habib, of course, right? But is he that good? I mean, what do you think of his win over Alfie Davis?
I think he is. I think he's just on a different level. He sent not only a message to the division in the PFL, but kind of the world, right? Like, great performance. Anytime you see any type of hole in his game, he seems to kind of fix that right away. So yeah, I think he is deserving of that praise. Even if it's from a family member, I've seen a lot of other people saying that as well, and I think he deserves it.
Nolan, where does this guy, this Nurmagomedov, rank amongst all the lightweights in the world? You got Sarukin, you got Topuria, you got Gaethje. The BMFs are fighting next month. Should he be mentioned amongst those guys?
I think you have to mention him at this point. I mean, the amount of title defenses he's had, how good he's looked, getting finishes, going to battle, going to war in there. And if you were to throw him in the UFC's rankings right now, like, to answer your question about him being a top 5, I mean, you got BSD sitting at 5 and you got Paddy Pimblett sitting at 6. So I think him and BSD would certainly be a good fight. And I would probably lean with Usman, honestly, if I were to see those two go. So I would put him in the top 5, which I think is a really high praise for somebody that we aren't able to see compete against the majority of the top talent in that division in the world.
Danny, what's next for him? But I don't want an opponent this time. Here's what I want to know. Would you sign him and keep him? Because I think he's getting close to that stage. They have re-signed Dakota Ditcheva, Johnny Eblen, AJ McKee. What would you do with this guy, man? Would you have him maybe join the other Nurmagomedov in the UFC, or does PFL need to hang on to arguably their number 1 pound-for-pound fighter?
Yeah, that's their guy. PFL has let go of so many good names that we've seen go over to other promotions since the Bellator merger, and they're in need of name value. They're in need of legitimate talent, and this guy is one of them. He's a champion. He's defended their belt. He's added weight to that title. I think they need to do whatever it takes to keep him around, and beyond that, not only just re-sign him, but also start fishing and looking for guys out there to make his title run interesting. Because at this point, it's not only like, okay, should they sign him, but also who the hell are they going to match him up against, right? It made sense now with Alfie Davis because he was the tournament winner. But man, I kind of feel like we've run out of opponents here, and those good names that they had, they've kind of went over to other promotions. So yeah, they got to keep him. He is a key player for them.
Nolan, Ramazan Nurmagomedov defeated Shamil Musaev. What we had here was an undisputed versus a tournament winner from 2024. Good fight. I think Musaev turned it on a little bit too late, but what were your thoughts on that fight? And it sounds like Nurmagomedov might be done and retired. So, a guy that spoke pretty decent English, fought well, was undefeated, he might bow out early. That kind of hurts the PFL too.
Yeah, I mean, talk about add that to the laundry list of items where the PFL, can't catch a break, right? You have you have a really high level fight between two guys that have held titles or trophies, whatever, tournament wins, whatever you want to call them, across major divisions. They fight, good scrap. You have a new champion, welterweight champ, and then he just retires the belt. That's just tough to see. It didn't seem like it was an impulse thing too. I know sometimes we hear fighters say things on the mic and they don't really mean it, or it's just out of emotion, but it seemed like that was a decision that he had really thought of. He said he had thought about it in the weeks leading up, and that he thought that MMA was such a time commitment and he didn't know if he wanted to do it anymore. So if that is the last that we see of him, kind of a tough break for PFL, right? Just an inability to get momentum in that division. But this is MMA, so I bet we'll see him back.
Yeah, and that's pretty decent run, man, to stay undefeated, win the Bellator and PFL belts. All right, but if he's done, he's done. Give me another highlight from the event goes from the PFL in Dubai card.
We interviewed Luke Trainer before this fight, and he literally did exactly what he said he would do in the interview. It was a good performance. He said he would end it in a submission the way he did, and I couldn't believe he just went out there and did exactly that. And I like his story, man. I feel like it's a guy that they can build off of.
Yeah, I think he can be a big name for the PFL. How about you, Danny? Another highlight from PFL Dubai.
Taylor Lapilus, I very much like his striking style. Kind of reminds me of a Paul Daly. He's solid, man. I like his fight, so shouts out to him. Got a third round TKO victory over Kasum Kasumov.
All right, Nolan, you know the drill. I need another highlight from this card. Let's put a little shine on someone.
Yeah, Amru Magomedov. I've been singing his praises for a couple of years. I don't know why a big promotion didn't take him. He seems to have everything. He's got the Habib tie-in. He's exciting. He's young. He finishes fights. And he just went out there and looked great. I mean, he kind of a weird finish, the way that Colton England crumpled, but I did see Colton wrote that it was the kick right before the sequence of punches that he felt shut down his body, kind of made him retreat. So really great debut, and I think the ceiling is championship for Amr Magomedov. I think he's really special.
All right. Salamat Izbulayev kind of ruined my day, man. I wanted Jesus Pinedo to come back after he got wronged by Movlid Kabulayev, who had defeated him, but then wound up testing positive for EPO. And he's a former champ. You know, I know how hard this guy works. I've seen him in a city in southern Peru at 13,000 feet, man, like actually pushing the cardio. But it's the wrestling that's killing him. But I got to give his opponent his flowers. He looked really, really good. Izbulayev can wrestle. He goes after you viciously with the ground and pound, so we'll have to keep an eye on him. Undefeated fighter as well. All right, moving on here. So, guys, this past week, UFC's Dana White and Hunter Campbell and a few others actually were in court. I want to welcome John Nash to the show. He'll give us some additional insight to this topic. He's been on the show before. It's great to have him back. He was actually in Las Vegas for these hearings, so please give him a follow on Twitter. He is at Hate Not the Face. He's also got a Substack with the same title there. John, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. Just still recovering from Vegas. It was
how many days was that, by the way, that they had all these, these execs and some of the other employees?
It was only 2 days. Two long, dull, boring days, which day before I found out I could have gone on remote access when I was already traveling to Vegas. So I could have done what Nolan did and just listen in instead of sitting through that goddamn proceeding. But yes, it was worthwhile being there, I guess.
Well, I listened to your podcast though, but it did look like you got something out of being there in person. You, Josh Gross, I believe, was another name that was there, and so you got to see some former fighters. You got to see the executives, and then just the vibe, right? The feeling of the room. Phones got taken away. What was your overall read on everything that was going on in there in terms of like both parties, who at one point, obviously, fighters in business with the promotion when they're fighting, but it's pretty it's a lot different right here in this setting.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was kind of nice not having my phone for 2 days. I got to be honest. I was in hindsight, I'm kind of thankful the judge did that because it was very relaxing not having to check my phone at all times. But the proceedings, it was interesting because you did get to see body language and stuff. You could see with the judge, because when they would, when he would sidebar with the attorneys, if you're remote, you're not seeing it, but you could see through the corner, you could see the judge. He was pretty animated at times on these sidebars, so that was entertaining. The one thing to pick up is, well, one is that there's no one in the audience here, which is somewhat shocking, considering the potential implications of a case like this. But the other thing is interesting is just in some ways how amicable the two sides are in the courtroom when they're dealing with each other. Right? There's no hostility. Even the fighters, you got all the fighters on one side who have complaints against UFC, have grudges, problems, and Dana White on the other side. And there was no real open hostility between them during the hearing. There was no threat of violence, no threat of even yelling or scowls at each other. Maybe they were informed ahead of time not to do that. But generally, people just seem like, okay, you're on that side, I'm on this side. Let's just, let's get through this with the least amount of conflict right now.
And then the judge and Dana also have a past high school, I think, or something.
Yeah, and you didn't get that vibe at all. I mean, there was no sense, because I came in expecting like Dana White to start picking on him, calling him Little Richie or something, and Boulware start complaining that, I know it was you that glued my locker shut or some crazy shit. And there was no sense of that. There was no sense of even like any. I mean, obviously they know who each other is, but there's no sense of like real recognition and they were very polite to each other on the stand. Or no sense that they were getting different treatment towards each other. None of that. So the whole idea, it's kind of hard to believe the idea that Judge Boulware is going personally out against Dana White, or that Dana White feels and the UFC feels this is a personal vendetta when you're in that courtroom, because there's none of that at all. It's purely along the lines of what's happening. And there was no hostility demonstrated at all from either party when he was on the stand.
John, one of the big deals last week was when Dana White testified. He says he's no longer involved in contract negotiations or matchmakings. What What was your initial reaction to that comment? And he actually turned back the clock a while. It's not like he said he stopped 6 months ago. Says it's been years.
Well, I partly believe, I know when I got out of the courtroom and I checked Twitter, that a lot of people were running with this. They're like, oh, that proves Dana White doesn't do anything. And when I was in the court, I was sitting there thinking, well, I think that's partly true. I'm like, yes, he's acknowledging somebody. I go, but it's kind of convenient him saying he has no part in any of this in a case where they're arguing he has probably key messages that have been lost that reveal the type of negotiating tactics the company has. So you got to remember that when Dana White and the UFC is saying he plays no part in the UFC negotiations or contract negotiations or matchmaking or any of that. Never mind, we have videos of him in the war room talking about how they matchmake. Never mind, we have interviews and articles about when George St. Pierre came back, how he negotiated partly with Dana White. When Eric Nixick and Francis Ngannou were on the outs, they had a dinner to talk about their contract with Hunter Campbell and Dana White. So that would suggest he takes part in some negotiations and matchmaking on just those few incidents. But forget that. You got to remember that what the argument is that the plaintiffs are arguing, they're trying to prove that these arbitration agreements and class action waivers were basically forced onto the fighters through the UFC's power, monopoly power, market power. And they need, based on the previous Lee case, they need the messages between the matchmakers and key executives to demonstrate this, because that was some of the key evidence they used in the Lee case, the previous class action. And so they need this evidence, and Dana White's missing years and years of his message, as well as Tracy Long is. And so for the defendants, what they're trying to argue is Dana White doesn't do that anymore. So it's not really a loss that we lost all these messages, because he doesn't do those type of negotiations anymore. So you just got to keep in mind that from the defendant's point of view, it's convenient to say that Dana White does none of this anymore, because that would mean that you're not really missing any key evidence in those missing discovery elements, where for the plaintiffs, it's like you perhaps intentionally lost this because there might be key material in there.
Mm-hmm. Let me turn it over to the guys. Danny Segura, what do you got for John Nash?
The things that you mentioned with Francis Ngannou, right? Like going to dinner, like the videos in the war room when he does stuff with some media members. That's stuff that like is very in the bubble, right? Like stuff that we know, that we cover, that we see on Embedded, et cetera, et cetera. But is the judge aware of that? And was there any pushback on that? Like, hey, how come at every press conference you go, wait till we talk on Tuesday, right? When we have the matchmaking meeting, this and that. Was there any pushback of that? And are they aware of those things that are out there in the media?
Well, I don't know if the judge specifically follows the UFC at all. I'm not sure he's a fan. Like, he's aware of like the general media, but he voiced disbelief when they said this. When Hunter Campbell brought this, he goes, I find it very hard to believe that the CEO of a company is completely unaware of the provisions you put in the contracts. It just doesn't make sense to him. So he did not believe that. And on top of that, it is very likely that the plaintiffs will bundle up, they've done that previously. Whenever something is said, they will bundle up a bunch of comments, articles, video clip, and demonstrate that Dana White or someone in the UFC does the opposite to demonstrate this isn't accurate. So I'm sure if the judge is not fully aware right now, I'm sure in the future, some future filing will have this material for him to look at and peruse and say, okay, this either what am I going to believe? Either these articles and these video clips or Dana White's testimony.
And what was Dana White's demeanor? Because I very much remember when this first started popping up, he was asked at a press conference, like, oh, what are your sort of thoughts about this lawsuit? And he's like, I don't know anything about it. That's how, not worried I am about it. But again, this is him speaking at a press conference for a fight, right? It's not really the setting. Also with media that it's either not equipped to push back or, there's, obviously a conflict there or fear of losing credentials or whatever the case may be. Now he's in front of a judge, right? He's looking up at a judge. He's in a courtroom, a completely different setting. Wondering from what you saw, did he sort of have the same bravado or the same confidence? I know I'm kind of asking you to play psychologist here, but what was kind of his demeanor within all this? Because it's getting more real, right?
Yeah, he did have kind of the same bravado. He was very confident in a lot of his answers. He seemed the same, although you could tell at times he was a little flustered, and you could also tell he was a little annoyed at the end of the plaintiff's questions towards him before they took a break and the defendant's attorney got to question him. And so there's a few moments where you could see it kind of the Dana White bravado slipped and stuff. He couldn't pull off some of the stuff we see in press conferences where he basically tells you off and doesn't answer the question. But it wasn't like, he wasn't flustered and stuff. Now, some of the other witnesses that came the next day, I guess the lesser known people that testified, they seemed a little bit more nervous. You could tell in their question. I think they're probably less ready. I'm sure Dana White had a lot of prep before going in. But overall, he was pretty confident. You sit there and you have to wonder, is he telling the truth? And it's kind of convincing at times that he is checked out, doesn't care about a lot of stuff. Same time, you're like, you're the CEO. That seems kind of unrealistic, but maybe that's true. Maybe that's his position. It's hard to tell based on, because he is very convincing in some of the stuff, even when it makes him look less professional, less of authority in the company.
All right, Goes, what do you have for John Nash?
John, so the judge that was there probably wasn't the only judge in attendance, because I'm going to make you a judge right now. If you had to go 10-9, Tracy's testimony, Dana's testimony, Hunter's, who kind of got the better of who on these testimonies?
Well, it's hard to judge it like a fight, because what the matter is up there, because I thought the witnesses for the UFC basically did a very good job of defending themselves about the material. The problem is it's kind of indefensible, because the plaintiff's attorney started out and they showed a video of Dana White in a deposition talking about how he fully understood that he had to preserve all material. They showed a signed affidavit that he would fully preserve it. They went over every step of the way, how people were reminded constantly how you had to take extra measures to preserve, that there was a litigation hold and all this stuff had to be preserved. So as convincing as I thought Dana White did, of like, oh, I don't know anything about computers, I don't know, which makes me question why he's on the board of Meta, that he knows nothing about technology. But as convincing as he was, like, I know nothing, I have all these other people doing it. It kind of just reinforces the plaintiff's case. It might make it hard to make an argument that it was malicious intent by the UFC to delete this stuff. But malicious intent, that they don't have to really prove that. They also have to show they were negligent. They had this order in place that they had to preserve all this material. And when you go through all the orders they were given, all the notices they were given, all the signed documents and sworn affidavits and everything that they said they would preserve it, and then you look at that they're missing years and years of data, and it seems to have just been kind of, yes, they made an attempt to preserve it, but it seems like a minimum attempt to preserve it. That alone is going to, if I was, in the judge's point of view, I have to assume Bowler's going to look at that and favor the plaintiff. So it's hard for me to go like 10, like who got the better of it, because UFC came into this court hearing really in the hole. It's like they had a 2-point deduction before they stepped into the court. So maybe maybe it ended up 10-8, even with the 2-point deduction, but they didn't go any lower.
Gotcha.
All right, sounds like they didn't make weight coming in, so they were deducted a couple points.
Yeah, exactly. They got their purse deducted too. Nolan, let's see what sanctions come. Let's see if they get any sanctions on that.
Go ahead, Nolan.
Yeah, I'm excited to ask you a couple questions about the second day. I haven't listened to the Hey Not the Face Day 2 recap, but I listened to the one where you were back in the hotel. And I'll say, for anybody that doesn't listen to your podcast, John does a great job of making it really digestible too. He gets a little more in the weeds, but he makes it so you can understand it. I know you're not a lawyer, but you're a very good communicator. So definitely want to give you a
I just
plug
dumb
there.
it down. I dumb it down to my level. And so if you're at my level, you're in good hands.
Well, I'm definitely I'm below your level, and you do a good job. So I want to ask you though, what did you make of Hunter Campbell's testimony, right? Because I think his was a little bit more impromptu. They had called him. He had kind of volunteered a little bit that first day. They were going to try to squeeze him in, and then he comes the second day. I believe he was up there the longest out of anybody as well. So I guess for people that didn't get to read any of the recaps or be there like yourself, I guess, were you, I don't know, was that kind of what you were expecting out of him? A little bit more lawyer speak, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we weren't expecting him at all. It was supposed to be just Dana White and Tracy Long, but the previous two defendants, I shouldn't say they were given. It was a spoliation hearing, so they were not really defendants, but they're the people giving their testimony. They kind of threw him under the bus a little bit because their whole thing is like, we did everything we're asked to, and we handed our cell phones to Hunter Campbell, and he took it. So then the judge was like, well, now I need to speak to the people that you mentioned. You mentioned this E figure, you mentioned Elliot Howard, and you mentioned Hunter Campbell. So we're going to bring Hunter Campbell in. So, and then Hunter Campbell took so long because he was very lawyer-like. He constantly asked for the question to be repeated, to be specified, only to answer that part. And so I guess you get a sense that if you're sitting there, you're feeling a little bit like, okay, are you trying to hide stuff? What are you nervous about? But at the same time, he came across pretty comfortable, somewhat convincing. But part of what made him convincing is he threw the outside attorneys under the bus. I thought that was their kind of responsibility. He did everything asked of him, that other, he's trying to wrangle everybody as requested, and that he gave these to these other attorneys. So Hunter Campbell, the interesting part about his testimonies, what Dana White and Tracy Long said is that, that they did what they requested. They gave their phones when requested Hunter Campbell, and supposedly the material was backed up. And Hunter Campbell's like, well, the attorneys from Crosby and Williams would come in and I'd give it to them, and they had a device there and we download it. So then it comes kind of on the outside attorneys like, well, why is that material not there? And on top of that, Hunter Campbell was the one saying, I remind people constantly, we take this very serious. And so, he did come across like, yes, the UFC is doing their part, except when we got to the cell phone issue. It got very confusing because, that was the key thing. That's the key communication. We have all our, we can get our emails and direct messages off the cell phones, but their method of preservation is basically we take the cell phone, we're done, and we put it in a cabinet or a drawer in a corner somewhere. And, later you're talking, well, do you have them marked? No one knows. Do you have the passwords on them so we can get into the phones? No, we don't have that. And so what good is it? No one knows what phones are there. No one knows, no one was aware of how many of Dana White's phones were there, who other people's phones were. So at the very end, the judge basically asked, someone go over there and take a photo of this corner. I want to see what this is, because I'm having a hard time envisioning just this stuff just lying there like that. And that's supposed to be preserved properly for the case. So he brought that up. And then there was the fact that there was a missing cell phone. Dana White's cell phone was apparently stolen, apparently by a relative of Ari Emanuel. So we had that issue. So just a lot of weird stuff involving the phones. And so, Hunter Campbell, I wouldn't say his testimony was not like unconvincing, but the problem was it didn't come across like you guys were really taking the preservation part 100% serious. Either on your end or your attorneys weren't doing a good enough job reminding you and making sure you did it. So I'm not sure overall when you add everything together, it helped everybody. But it was, he did go through like Dana White's responsibilities, and it, the part where he kept talking about what Dana White doesn't do made everybody ask, well, what the hell does Dana White do for that company? If he doesn't do anything, basically, what does he do? And we never really got around to that part, besides the fact that Dana White's the visionary.
Yeah. And the second thing I want to ask you about was right before Hunter went. It was kind of the moment, I think, where when it happened, I was like, oh, shit's kind of getting real here a little bit, was when Judge Boulware was kind of reprimanding the defendants about saying that it could be sanctionable, their tardiness with submitting certain data and cell phones and whatnot. I guess, can you kind of explain that and maybe what kind of sanctions could, in theory, they be looking at?
Yeah, this is the key part. Now, during the hearings, you listening, it didn't seem like the judge was playing favors, because he was very annoyed with the plaintiff's attorneys often, that they weren't getting to the point, they weren't asking the right questions. But he really laid into the defendant's attorneys. And what his argument was, if you follow the case, you'll realize what it was pretty quickly, is they haven't produced anything. It's their job to kind of get their clients in line. And he was upset because he's like, well, we've been asking for this material for months. You've been kind of delaying it, making arguments. And now I'm hearing new material now, new excuses just now, when we should have heard this months ago. Why has this not taken care of? You're now explaining to me that you can't really get into the phones because if you enter the wrong password 3 times, they'll be deleted. Well, I mean, it doesn't take much. Well, that's not really preserving the material if there's a threat that it's all going to be deleted because you didn't keep track of the passwords, right? That's not really doing the responsibility. Plus, there's no explanation not only what happened to Dana White's recent phone, but why was there material for a 5-year block from 2015 to 2020 for Dana White and Tracy Long gone? Why wasn't that preserved? Why don't we have that material? The lost phone might explain 18 months recently, but doesn't explain the 5 years in the past. So he basically laid into him, because it's like, as he was explaining, and not even just just reiterating to him, is that we have given you multiple time. You knew this case was coming. We had these hearings kind of scheduled in advance, and I'm only now hearing that you're still working on this, still trying to find answers. You should have the answers by now. And so he has threatened them with sanctions. And that's the big risk for the UFC here. That's why I think this is kind of important. If you're a fighter and you're in the Johnson class period, in other words, you fought from 2007, July 1st, 2017 until today, and you perhaps are hoping for some sort of check like the Lee class got, well, your big concern might be that you might have signed an arbitration agreement and class action waiver. And because of that, you cannot take part in this class action. If this case is declared a class action, you cannot take part. And so you cannot get any damages or settlement money. But there is the Serkinov v. Zuffa case ongoing, which represents those that signed the arbitration agreements. And the reason they're doing this discovery is they want to see if the UFC abused their monopsony power to force fighters to sign these arbitration agreements. Well, without the material, the messages, they really can't make a determination. So the judge, because they were so grossly negligent, he could say, he gave them 30 days. So 30 days, we will know if they have any of the material. If they supply the material, the judge will probably be forgiving. If they don't, he's talked about doing sanctions, and what the sanctions could run anywhere from him fining the attorneys, forcing the attorneys to pay the legal fees of the plaintiffs, which is great for those attorneys because they don't have to wait for a win to get paid, or even go further and declare, basically take several actions. One is declare that the worst would be if he struck the answer, in other words, saying you have no defense, Zuffa, and you basically have no case. That would be the worst. Now, I could see that happening in Serkinov. I don't think he would apply that, just from what I heard from other people. I don't think that big of sanction would be applied to the other cases. But even on Serkinov, that means suddenly all those fighters that signed arbitration agreements, class action waivers, are back into the antitrust case. And so that's, one potential outcome. But even on top of that, if that material is ruled to be very key to the case, when we get, even after the order for Serkinov is done, when we get to the Phil Davis case or the Johnson v. Zuffa trial case, the judge might, especially it's a bench trial for Davis, so the judge himself might say, I have to take something of an adverse inference on this case because the material is missing, and he might, and for Johnson, might instruct the jury the same. And what an adverse inference is he would tell the jury, anytime material comes up that could be explained by these messages in the text messages, you are allowed to interpret it the best way possible for the plaintiffs and the worst way possible for the defendants. And that is pretty damn scary if you're in a courtroom and the jury is going to take the worst interpretation of anything in the case if the judge directs them to do that. And so that's got to be the tremendous fear for the UFC, that they've kind of put themselves in this corner where they have basically given, if they can't find the material, if the judge rules that way, they have given the plaintiffs just a tremendous advantage over them going forward.
John, when do they reconvene again?
Well, this Wednesday we have a meeting. Now we will find out. They were supposed to send a picture from a camera of that cabinet to the judge. I don't know if they have. I haven't seen anything filed that shows they did that. So we'll see Wednesday. They're supposed to have several answers concerning the material, the missing material on Wednesday. We'll see if we'll have any of those. And then after that, we'll have the status conference coming up, and then the 30-day countdown. I don't know what day they start that and what day it ends, but we'll have 30 days for them to produce, to finally produce all that discovery that's missing. And if they can't produce it or can't produce the majority of it, that's when things get interesting. And get a little more, I guess, a little more concerning for the UFC going forward.
I just have one quick question, John.
Yeah.
This is not really, I guess, fully about the case, but how is it even legal that you can have the fighters sign a contract that they will not take part of a class action lawsuit?
Well, because there was years ago, there was a bill called the Federal Arbitration Act signed, which the Supreme Court recently has ruled supersedes state law, and basically because it's a law that was, I think it was passed in the 30s, but never been interpreted and used this way. But recently has been interpreted that arbitration agreements have to be federally recognized, or the federal court recognized them above state law. So you have to accept them. Now so anytime it's put into a contract, that's why companies now on their little, when you get the little small print, when you click on something, it says you cannot take part in a class action. They're just pushing it on people left and right. The one exception to this is there's a few exceptions of when this doesn't apply. And one is there's Nevada law, and Nevada law voids, even under the Federal Arbitration Act, it voids arbitration clauses when they're proven to be both procedurally and substantially unconscionable. And so what the judge has to, the plaintiffs have to prove to the judge is that procedurally that it was a take it or leave it contract, basically that the UFC had monopoly power and said, you have to take this and leave it, and that it's unconscionable. And unconscionable means it has to be so one-sided that it shocks the conscience. It has to be a terrible contract provision. Well, the part that may reach unconscionable is the fact that there was an ongoing antitrust case, and so the fighters had to expect that they would be involved in either in that case or the next one, and yet they were compelled to sign this agreement. And this is where the UFC could get really in trouble in this case, is because their evidence would have been fighters freely signed it. We did nothing to force this on the fighters. We used no threats, no coercion, nothing. Well, the way you prove that is those text messages. And if they're all gone, the judge goes, well, I have to interpret this as that you use nothing but coercion and threats to force people to sign this. And that's why this is terrible for the UFC, because it basically automatically makes the ruling in the judge's favor and makes it very hard to appeal. So I'm sure that's why they've been filing, Hail Mary cases in the Ninth Circuit trying to get out of this.
John, I want to thank you for stopping by, spinning Back Clique, and discussing this with us. We'd love to have you back as the case continues to unfold. This was really, really great for our audience. And folks, don't forget, you can follow John on Twitter, at Hey Not The Face. Also, the Substack is heynotttheface.substack.com. Thank you, sir, again.
Appreciate having me on. I enjoyed coming on again sometime.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you,
All
John.
right. And folks, we are out of here as well. So thank you always for tuning in to Spinning Back Clique again every Monday live, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, where we unpack the biggest stories of the week, go over the results. There's no action this week, so there's really not much that we would have talked about. Just on the way out, congratulations to the Seattle Seahawks and their fans for the big win they had in the Super Bowl. And Andre Arlovski, got to give him a shout out as well, winning the heavyweight title over at Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship over Ben Rothwell. We'll go over some of these stories on next week's Spinning Back Clique. For now, we're out of here. Go out and be a champion.